Dylan, maybe perhaps nobody has had a more unique version of name, image, and likeness, and taking advantage of it to the common good than
Mhm.
than you. Take us through what made you decide that you were going to use this as a positive for the greater good and help out a friend of yours in Timothy Donovan.
Well, first, I got to thank you so much for having me on today. At the end of the day, it's still kind of crazy to me. This blew up the way it did, um, especially in our day and age right now. Just brought me so much hope. But yeah, starting with Timothy. So actually, back in 2017 was when I first met Timothy. Actually, outside the gates of my first Notre Dame game. That was actually the day I got to run through the tunnel for the first time, which is something I was looking forward to most of my young life. But after that experience of running through the tunnel, I got to walk back up the tunnel. As I walked back up the tunnel, I had my gloves in one hand and my helmet in the other. I was approached by probably about 40, maybe 50 young kids and other families, just wanting autographs, or all of them wanted something from me. Whether it was the gloves in my hand or just a few minutes of my attention, everyone wanted something for me. People were kind of tugging on me. I was scanning the crowd. I was just trying to engage with somebody, not just a kind of an A-B relationship where I give you something and you bring it home. So I saw Timothy. So I went over to Timothy, ended up kneeling down next to him. Our conversation lasted probably about 40 minutes. Again, I was pretty tired. That was the first time I was actually going to be able to see my family since camp back then. And I was very, very eager to learn more about Timothy. So from that moment, from the start of our relationship, we've been connected. That same day, my mom and his mom, Paula, got connected and just kind of kept me updated on Timothy's condition. So yeah, since 2017, met him back there at my first Notre Dame game.
For those that don't know Timothy's story, just explain what his condition is, Dylan.
Yeah, so Timothy has Charcot-Marie tooth. He's born with it, a disease called bactelar, which affects the nerve endings in his hands and his feet. Along with that, he's been wheelchair bound for most of his life, all of his life. And what that has caused him is, as you can imagine, other complications that a lot of people face. Being in a wheelchair like that, not being necessarily being able to support his upper body all the time, that's left him with a curvature in his spine that up until this summer was at 90 degrees, one portion of his spine. And because of that curve, as you can probably imagine, he couldn't breathe very well. So that it caused him to have a lot of fluid buildup in his lungs, which ended up giving him pneumonia. He's had pneumonia a lot in his life. So he was getting pretty sick and tired of having to depend on outside sources to supply him oxygen. So he wanted to get that curvature fixed. So this summer he actually had it fixed. At least they attempted to. They took that 90-degree bend and turned it into a 45-degree bend. And so far he's done great. Since that surgery, he had pneumonia earlier in the month. He was in the hospital for a little bit, but he's doing a lot better now. They believe that the antibiotics they gave him in the hospital have kind of kicked that out of his system. He's definitely on the right track, and doing the right things.
So take us through the process of deciding, hey, I want to use, name, image and likeness, and now get Timothy to this unique environment of my first game playing for Florida State against Notre Dame, who I know you still love Notre Dame, and Timothy certainly loves Notre Dame, and have that all come together.
Yeah, so let me take you back to that night in 2017 as I met him. You see, I left that meet after I met Timothy. I left Notre Dame and I went back to my house, and I thought a lot about my first game at Notre Dame. I thought a lot about running through the tunnel. I thought a lot about the promises made to my dad to do that someday. But something kept me from sleeping. It was thinking about Timothy. You see, Timothy, he has a lot of people that come in and out of his life in about 24 hours. A lot of people that'll give him the world for a few minutes or a few seconds. But a lot of people don't follow up with him. And that's something I just analyzed with him meeting it and talking to Paula and checking out his Instagram and seeing the type of experiences he's been on. But didn't seem like he ever had someone that was there for him. And at that point in my life, as you can imagine, being a freshman coming out of high school and coming to Notre Dame, I felt like other than my family, didn't really have anyone in my life that was there for me. My family members were all there for me, but as far as friends and people that inspired me, I didn't really have anybody. So I was going through a rough time, and I know Timothy was too. We started leaning on each other. whether that was him setting, updating on his condition and how he's doing, little bits of inspiration through videos, or even just Paula telling me about how Timothy was doing or what he was up to. And the same for me and my mom, just kind of going back and forth. So having that relationship throughout my whole college experience in Notre Dame, and him coming to the majority of my home games in Notre Dame throughout my 4 years there, meant the world to me. And that was a start, and that's how our relationship grew. Up until the point where a few months ago I decided to leave Notre Dame. One of the toughest decisions I've had to make in my whole life. But I decided to leave Notre Dame and come to Florida State. So with that process, I knew Timothy would be crushed. I knew he'd be very upset. I knew the Donovan family. It would be a struggle to get them here. They're from Dayton, Ohio, so going to Notre Dame isn't that much big of a deal. But going down to Florida, that's a whole nother thing, a whole nother box of worms. So when I decided to do that, and probably about 2 years ago, is when I started to build a game plan of what I could do for Timothy once I was able to use my name, image, and likeness. So once I got to Florida State, I was actually educated on how the state of Florida would allow players to use name, image, and likeness, even before the NCAA passed the ruling. So I started laying out groundwork. I started my MBA classes, and other than that, in football, I really didn't have much to do. So I started planning out what I could do for Timothy and his family. So with that, I started a GoFundMe. And as many people know at this point from the Notre Dame community and the FSU community, that GoFundMe was a tremendous success. Little under 23 hours, ended up raising $30,000. It was a joint effort, Notre Dame, FSU, and also all of college football, anyone that the story could potentially pertain to. So again, I was very excited. The Donovan family was thrilled. We had even some big brands kind of step in, like Super Coffee. I never knew about Super Coffee. I saw their work on Shark Tank a few years ago, but other than that, I never even heard the brand. So for them to come out and donate $15,000 like that, it was just absolutely crazy. It really showed how much of a Wild West image like this is. So with that support and the support from both the communities, so far we've raised $50,000 to get into the game. What's even more incredible than that, a GoFundMe started to get into the game has turned into something way bigger than that. It's turned into something that's going to elevate Timothy's quality of life for many, many, many more years to come. I've been told by my family and my mom, who's had a lot of conversations with the Donovans, that this is going to be one of the biggest moments in his life. Come down here to Tallahassee. And it's been absolutely insane the amount of support that I've received and Timothy's received. People from the Tallahassee community stepping up, from the Booster Club here at FSU, giving them tickets, from hotels in the area to even the bookstore here in Tallahassee, to supply the whole family with clothing, which has been absolutely insane. And for a company like GoFundMe to step up and sponsor me as their first athlete ever sponsored by GoFundMe. See, GoFundMe does God's work. They don't necessarily declare they have religious indifference, or whatever you want to call it, but they do God's work. They set up and help people contribute to things that they're passionate about, people they want to help, organizations, whatever it may be. For them to want to sponsor me, it really meant the world. Really put it in perspective for me. Allowed me to see a bigger future than what I was already doing. So with their support, they've actually given me a team of 3 or 4 individuals that have helped me with Timothy's campaign and the marketing side of that, and B, start some other things that I'd love to discuss with you a little bit later in the show today. But it's been an absolutely incredible experience. I can only imagine what the Donovans are going through right now. I've had a lot of conversations with them, and we've been updated all the way throughout fall camp. But they're going to be on their way up here this Thursday, and I'm very excited to see them.
Dillan Gibbons, former Notre Dame offensive lineman, will start against the Irish Sunday night for Florida State. He is our Focus on Faith interview guest here on the season debut of Notre Dame Federal Credit Union's Irish Sports Saturdays. Dillan, you mentioned God's work. How I know your Catholic faith is very important to you. How much were you praying for Dillan since that first day you met him?
Oh, you mean Timothy?
I'm sorry. How much were you praying for Timothy from that first day you met him?
See, I've just I've kept Timothy in my prayers. See, our relationship, we talk about what happened from 2017 until now, but something we figured out is more our moms talking, if I'm being honest here. But what's really interesting is that we actually went to our first Notre Dame game together. My first game was in 2007. It was a Syracuse game, and he was also there. You see, that's a game that I told my dad. It was actually a snow game. It was pretty miserable, if I'm going to be honest. As you can imagine, one of the snow games, South Indiana, isn't very much fun. But we were wearing our ski clothes. We're from Florida, so that's all we had. Freezing to death in the upper rows in Notre Dame Stadium before they added those additions on. And I remember telling my dad that I wanted to run through the tunnel someday. Very Rudy-esque, but at the same time, that was something I was able to do. It saddens me to think about Timothy's experience. He got to see Notre Dame. I'm sure he got to see the Grotto and Touchdown Jesus, and maybe got to shake some hands with some players. But he wasn't able to tell his dad the same thing. He wasn't able to have that same kind of hope about his future. But me and Timothy are very like-minded individuals. I completely believe that if Timothy was in my same shoes right now and had the same platform, the same ability that I have, that he'd be doing everything he possibly could every day to try to help me out, whether that be through inspiring me or something along the lines of what I did for him in the past couple months.
It's such an incredible story. Can you put in perspective what that moment will be like Sunday night when you're ready to take on Notre Dame, but also knowing that Timothy's right there watching and, cheering you on, but maybe also cheering on Notre Dame? I don't know how his perspective's going to be on this one.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me start with that question. He's going to be wearing Florida State. And
Okay.
At the end of the day, even before all this happened, back when I decided to leave Notre Dame, he told me that he was a Dillan Gibbons fan and not a Notre Dame fan. Wherever I ended up, he'd be a fan of mine. So I am very excited about that. B, getting back to the Rudy question, what's it going to be like? You see, I'm trying not to think about it too much. It's going to be a very interesting experience, to say the least. Playing against those guys, I've had thousands of reps against. It's going to be incredible. But I'm really just trying to focus on what's important, right? The next play, the next snap, all those good things. But the way I think about Timothy and having him in my back pocket, I like to kind of compartmentalize my life. For me, it's faith, family, football. And to have those things in line, it really helps me just kind of concentrate. So having Timothy at the game will definitely be able to check off a box for me, and know that he's in a good place and he's supporting me. He's hopefully living vicariously through my actions on the field.
Dillan Gibbons, our guest here on Focus on Faith on Notre Dame Federal Credit Union's Irish Sports Saturdays. You say faith, family, football. I always like to say this interview segment is the intersection of faith, family, and football. So funny that you mentioned that. But let's talk a little bit more about your faith and, growing up Catholic in Florida and when you're, how that all ignited for you, as a kid and how your faith has grown as you've grown up.
So I was born and raised Catholic, born and raised a Notre Dame fan, as you can imagine, being Irish Catholic. So for me, as I went through life, I went to a lot of different Catholic schools. I even started high school at St. Petersburg Catholic, and I finished high school at Clearwater Central Catholic. See, throughout high school, I started taking my faith more and more seriously. As I entered Clearwater Central Catholic, I immediately joined the peer ministry program, where I got to help host retreats and bring my peers along with me. So for me, being a big guy, having a lot of strong roots in my faith, I was able to help a lot of individuals while I was at school there. As I moved from Clearwater Central Catholic into Notre Dame, it was really kind of eye-opening to see a lot of individuals from a lot of different places all engaging at a Catholic university like that. So for me, as you can imagine, having people like Father Nate around, it really helped me engage my faith on a different level. The one thing I will say is that Mass is before games, right? On a football team. A football team kind of represents all of the United States, right? You have individuals, highly touted individuals from each part of the country. They're all brought to the same place to perform on a team, right? And in order to have those guys all perform, there needs to be some type of culture and some type of standard held. One of those was going to Mass every week. And we didn't require everyone to participate in Mass. Everyone respected Mass. So for me as a practicing Catholic, of course, I'd go up and receive communion, just participate through all of Mass. We had some other guys on the team that you can imagine from different faiths that still sat there and respected what was going on. So in my opinion, Notre Dame didn't necessarily push anything on us that wasn't already there. Then we anticipated that being there. But for me, it was a wonderful experience, at least to be incorporate that in other parts of my life. I'm a very self-motivated person, but to be able to have those kind of extrinsic motivators is something I couldn't pass up on. It definitely helped me get through some tough times in Notre Dame.
And where do you feel your faith is now and plays a role in of importance in your life, not only with what you're doing with GoFundMe and Timothy, but just as you live your life, as a Catholic that has prominence as starting offensive lineman at Florida State.
Yeah, so I'm sure Father Nate probably knows what I went through at Notre Dame, whether that be on the field or in the classroom, some of my struggles and some of my good times. My faith has always been there for me, whether it be injuries, things that are great, like what happened for Timothy so far, the creation of Big Man, Big Heart. But it's always there. So as I transition away from Notre Dame to Florida State, it's still with me. Still going to different types of services, chapel services here at Florida State. I'm just very excited to engage on campus here.
You're a graduate from Notre Dame. You have your degree, and then you make the decision, as we talked about earlier, to transfer to Florida State. You kind of said it was a really difficult decision. Just take us through the process of what made you decide, okay, it's time to move on and take that next step.
Yeah. Like I said, it was a tough decision. But being blessed by Notre Dame to have that experience, being blessed with a degree that I worked extremely hard for, and the hard work I put on the football field, and giving max effort every day, no one can ever take that away from me. You see, I woke up the day after the spring game, just a few months ago, and I thought to myself, what's keeping me here? And of course, my faith, it was definitely keeping me. That's a part of it. How comfortable I was up in Southland, Indiana, the coaches, and how familiar I was with all the players in the locker room, my position, whether that be security or insecurity. With all those being said, I approached my coaches with a list of 5 or 6 questions, very distinct questions asked about my future. You see, with COVID-19, everything else going on, I would actually have a 5th year and a 6th year to play football. And one of the major things that happened was I couldn't get a 6-year guaranteed from Notre Dame. I'm not sure why that is, but along with that and a few other questions I had to ask the coaches, I wasn't confident in my ability to stay at Notre Dame. And that's on a business side of things and just a relationship side of things. Wasn't enough trust there. So moving forward, I used some of the strategies that I learned inside my classes in management consulting at Notre Dame to actually find that correct decision. I actually reached out to a few of my strategic business decision making teachers at Notre Dame, professors. And with their support and other people in my life, whether they're my family or friends or mentors, I jotted down everything I could, all the pros and cons, and leaving Notre Dame was the best decision for me. And as you can see, if I'm sure you probably stayed connected and at least followed what I've been doing so far, it was definitely the best decision I made my whole life.
And then you end up at Florida State. At what point did you realize, oh wow, we're playing Notre Dame in the first game?
No, I realized as soon as I made the decision.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Just how crazy will it be? I mean, you kind of touched on it before, but just lining up against your buddies, you'd be on the opposite side, and your first game wearing a different uniform. In fact, in some ways, you might accidentally, I don't know, you might jump offside just thinking you're supposed to be on the other side on occasion. It's certainly possible. The colors might throw you off. Just how crazy of an experience do you think this is going to be for you?
Yeah, I really hope I don't jump off sides. But yeah, like I said earlier, this is going to be very unique. Probably hasn't happened many times in college football, especially with being the first game. So for me, I'm just going to block them like birds. Nameless, faceless opponent. At the same time, they're some of my best friends in the world. Some of those guys I'll have lifelong relationships with. Those were built through the grit and the grind and everything we went through together on the football field and even in winter conditioning. So those things will never be taken away. Again, what's important now is beating Notre Dame. So I'm excited to contribute in any way, shape, form possible to get that done.
Finally, Dillan, I understand you're starting a podcast. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you saw this either, but I actually started a nonprofit called Big Man Big Heart. And my intentions for Big Man Big Heart are to get Big Man Big Heart representatives all over college football. You see, I found many entry barriers into getting into actually setting up GoFundMe's and trying to receive charitable donations for an individual like Timothy as a football player. This is unprecedented. It's something we've never been able to do. What I'm trying to do is just encourage people to do the right thing, encourage people to use their name and likeness for good. Um, and I want to open gates that have previously been closed in charitable giving. For me, so far, we've started a nonprofit. It's called Big Man Big Heart. It's registered in the state of Florida. We actually received our tax ID number about a week and a half ago now. With that, we started a round of seed funding so far to get this off the ground. But I'm very excited to impact college football, and I really want to leave a lasting impression. I believe I'm very capable of doing so, and I'm very excited to see where this thing's going to go.
That's awesome. Congratulations on starting a nonprofit. Congratulations on raising more than $50,000 for Timothy and his family. And best of luck in this game. I know Notre Dame fans will be cheering you on, but not cheering you on probably too much, as they obviously want their Irish to win. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today, Dylan.
Yeah, I really appreciate you, and thank you for your time.